That's my favorite thing when I go talk to a doctor.
Yeah.
Like, what kind of law do you practice? I said, I mostly sue doctors. My specialty is when they don't make proper diagnoses.
You remember that?
They don't think it's funny at all.
No sense of humor about it at all, huh?
Here's to a good podcast.
Here's to a good podcast.
Georgia lawyers Bob and Irreverent D talk law. Listen up for stories about how things really happen in our legal system. Who are these guys? Dwayne Singleton, Irreverent D, is a criminal. Turn page. Defense attorney. Benjamin O Bengtson will personally injure. What? Oh, wait. Is a personal injury attorney in Atlanta. Now, sit back and take a listen as Bob and Irreverent D talk law.
You remember that guy who did the YouTube video when he got arrested? He's like, I'm calling Bob Law.
Oh, yes.
He loves to sue cops.
It was the
no,
best.
God.
There's nothing better than a video
Right.
where they're going, I'm going to call my lawyer, and they're throwing your name out there.
Especially they're when they're accusing cops of all kinds of
That should be our intro.
What?
That clip.
That clip. I'm
With
calling
that
Bob.
guy.
Yeah.
I have a clip somewhere where somebody's going, I'm going to call Dwayne Singleton. We'll put them both together.
Right.
You know, just people yelling at police officers that they're going to.
We ain't going to put up with this. My lawyer will not
It's
stand
going
for
to
this.
cost you $10,000 a day for
He's
every
gonna-
day you touch me.
You're going to lose your job like that other police officer in Mville. Yeah.
Let me tell you how many cops my lawyer's gotten fired.
At some point, I'm going to lose my scotch. So
helpful.
So
On my end, you know, trying to help with their criminal side of the case.
yeah, because like how they look when they're on the dash cam videos
Is very important. I
But
mean, if I
is
can
that
tell
really,
any.
is that really even admissible what they do on the dash cam video?
Absolutely.
Really?
And I would say the best thing you can do is just be nice.
Well, I say that anyway.
If you can be quiet and nice and polite and not be an a-hole, I can probably win your case.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's going to have to be some kind of technical legal issue.
And we don't like to have to win on technicalities.
I enjoy winning on technicalities. They're fun.
Yes.
But sometimes if you're just nice and I have a technicality,
It's
the
even
state will
better.
do this wonderful thing where they dismiss it
Or null pros.
or null pros it.
What does that mean? I've heard that like five different times.
So null pros just means that they're not going to prosecute it.
But why do they say things fancy when they can just say it simple?
Because
They use all
a
this
null
Latin
pros
stuff.
is technically different than a dismissal.
Right. They're just saying we're deciding we're not going to
Gonna
prosecute. this.
Whereas a dismissal means I have a reason, a legal reason why there's not a case here, and I'm going to dismiss it. A null pros gives them the opportunity, if they wanted to, they could probably come back and reaccuse the case and go forward. 99.9% of the time, they're not.
So if they dismiss the case
It's done, gone.
because of double jeopardy.
And if I'm right before trial and the state can't get some of their evidence together and the state goes, I want to null pros this case, I object. Objection, Your Honor. We're ready to go forward. Let's
So
go.
They'll say that in front of the judge. We want to null pros the case.
And they have that absolute right.
Okay.
A lot of judges will let them null pros, but I'm going to always put the objection out there. And some judges, if you got the right judge, he'll go, we're going to go forward. And the state goes, well, I'm going to dismiss it.
So you
Done.
just force their hand and now they can't bring it back.
Yeah.
So you're going to get the burglar off.
If they can't prove the case.
Great, Dwayne. Put another person back on the streets. Very good. Alleged burglar.
I'm just requiring the state to carry their actual burden. And their burden is great. And the legislature set that burden for them. I'm making them follow within the rules that has been set for them to go by.
Well, do you think it's about time to do the news?
Let's do the news. Let's
do the
talk
news.
about
What do you have-
something
what do you
that's
have over there?
interesting here.
And now, the news.
Let's see what we got here in the good old daily. Ex-auditor sues Equifax alleging failure to answer complaint. That's you. That's not me.
Yeah, I'm not touching that.
Pass.
Sorry.
I got MedMal appeal could bring sweeping change in physician liability. That sounds really like
Boring.
Yeah. Okay.
Enough of that. What else you got?
Oh, civil rights lawyer awarded $608K fee in Atlanta police case.
I heard about
interesting.
that. That is interesting. So here's what happened.
Okay.
You can read through that article, but the police officers stopped this person for jaywalking.
All right.
And then they did this test on some kind of squeeze ball that they had, where
Okay.
the squeeze balls have like some kind of powder stuff in them. So they did this test. They stuck their little knife inside the squeeze ball, like you see on NCIS or whatever on CSI.
Like we're testing
We're testing it to see if there's coke in there. And they said
Miami Vice.
Right, Miami Vice are going to
take a
lick
little
it.
bit of it. Okay.
Exactly. So they said that there was coke in there, but the
stress ball.
In the stress ball.
Gotcha.
And so they arrested the person, held them overnight, and sometime later they were prosecuting them for the violation. But it turns out like they never could show that it was cocaine or something bad in the stress ball.
Okay.
So in an epic twist,
So we got a bogus arrest.
we got a bogus arrest. So in an epic twist, that person sues the city of Atlanta for false arrest and false imprisonment and malicious prosecution, all these things. So that person goes on the offensive, saying, you targeted me because of who I am. They were a transgender person.
Okay.
And so the police officers, they had a whole trial about it. At the trial, the attorneys for the person who was suing the police showed this drug test thing like 4 different times, and they could never replicate what the police officers allegedly did with it. So the jury awarded this plaintiff against the police officer $1.2 million.
This is with the city of Atlanta.
Well, that's the thing. We're going to get to that in a second. So, and then right.
So the officer filed a motion for qualified and official immunity.
What is that?
So you hear everybody say, I'm going to sue the police, I'm going to sue the police, I'm going to sue the police. We have calls all the time. But the big problem you got to get over is this qualified immunity or officer official immunity. So basically the Supreme Court has said if the officer is acting within his job and following the rules, that he can't personally be held liable for it. And so most of your cases, when you're dealing with a police officer who does something wrong, it's going to get kicked out in summary judgment because of qualified immunity. But it looks like here that it did, and the case went up to the U.S. Court of Appeals in the 11th Circuit, and they deemed them personally liable. Now,
So what this means,
I mean, somebody spent a ton of money fighting this case, for one.
right? So hang on a second. So what this means is that the plaintiff
Yes.
sued the police officers and the city of Atlanta,
Right.
but the city of Atlanta doesn't have a judgment against them?
Correct, because they were protected, but the officer was not. Because
How is that even possible?
Well, because the officer can only be held liable if there was some kind of constitutional issue that he violated, and obviously they found that he did. And so then the officer has been found personally liable for this. So the biggest problem with this is going to be any possibility of collection.
Why?
Because you've got
No, they have a $1.2 million verdict against the police. Why is that a problem?
Because it's going to be the officer that's going to have to personally pay this, and he's not going to have an insurance policy. And most police officers are not going to have a $2 million home that's paid for cash. And it looks like here he's already moved some of his assets to his wife, and they're saying that he fraudulently conveyed his ownership interest to protect his spouse. So you got a paper judgment.
A paper judgment. So what you're saying is that this person sued the police. The
Right.
police department got off.
Right. And then they're not
And
going to pay this judgment.
all they have is basically a $1.2 million verdict and $600,000 on in attorney fees against the police officers themselves, not against the police department.
Right.
That is crazy. How
So
are
it's-
they going to get money from the police officers?
So it says here, the message the city is sending to its officers is clear. If you work for the city of Atlanta, you stand to lose everything.
Who
The
said
city
that?
will
Who
not
said
stand
that?
behind you. This is the plaintiff's lawyers.
The ones who got the verdict.
The one who got the verdict and can't get paid. So
that is an interesting message.
So the attorneys have spent a ton of money because they've taken this case all the way up
time, anyways, right?
to the U.S. Court of Appeals to hear this. Time and money, resources. They've tried this case, got a verdict, and now the city's not going to pay it. So, yeah, you got to file a lawsuit.
So this comes down to
qualified immunity.
Our lesson in life. There's the law, and then there's what happens.
Right. I mean, you hear this, and it sounds great. They got $607,000 in attorney's fees and a $1.5 million verdict, but I don't know if they've gotten any money yet.
I mean, it kind of sounds the way
it reads,
the way the attorney is talking makes it kind of sound like maybe they're not.
Right. So, I think the attorneys are probably doing this because we're seeing a big push for people like myself that thinks the state needs to do away or make a way to do away with qualified immunity. And I get a lot of people that get mad at me and they're like, back the blue, protect the officers. But the problem is when somebody does something bad.
Right, if they go rogue, shouldn't they be responsible?
Right, and there should be an insurance policy out there, or somebody held responsible to pay that for damages, and there's just not. And if you want to fix some of the problems we have with law enforcement, require them to carry a $10 million insurance policy.
And then if they're not insurable, they can't be a police officer?
Because what happens now is the officer gets in trouble in East Bumble, okay?
Right. Or Umville.
Umville. They sweep it under the rug, and then I see that same officer pop up in South Bumble, right? And now he's working down there. Nobody knows he got in trouble over here for beating somebody up or doing something he wasn't supposed to or pulling them over and cutting their seats open with a razor knife or some violation.
To look for drugs.
Stabbing people, shooting people accidentally, all these type of things. But they move them around and nobody knows about it because they self-police themselves. If you had an insurance company that had to insure that officer,
man, that's a brilliant. I have not thought about that. That's a brilliant
he wouldn't
idea.
be able to find a job anywhere else because he wouldn't be insurable because the insurance companies would keep up with that. Not only that, we know that insurance companies hire very bright lawyers that fight with us all the time about every little thing. They would have training. They would have extra
they would be making,
time. They
really
would make sure that everybody knew how to do things right because they would be scared of lawyers like you and me coming after them and having to pay out that insurance policy. But right now, qualified immunity
keeps them from having to.
I mean, they got a verdict, but the city of Atlanta paid zero. The only person.
So we don't know. We're assuming because of the way they're sounding.
Right.
So, this brings up another issue that I actually have come up with potential clients all the time, where they say, "Well, do I have a case?"
Right.
And the answer is, well, if you have the basic level of facts, you have a case.
I can file a lawsuit about anything if I got $300 and some time, right?
Right. But a lot of times when you're talking to a lawyer, really the question is not whether you have a case, it's whether you have a case that the lawyer can afford to work on given the risk of losing. Because we'll spend the time on the case, and if we lose with our client.
So if you spend $30,000, $40,000 prepping a case, working a case up, going to trial, and you come back and you get a small verdict or a zero verdict, what happens? Who pays that bill?
Well, if you get a zero verdict, I eat that bill.
Okay.
Because, and this is pretty standard in the industry, if we don't get a recovery, then I don't charge you an attorney fee.
So all that time, money, and effort, you should have just been on fishing out on your boat somewhere.
Get a beach house or something that I know is going to pay. But yeah, I mean, it's a risk for me because I don't know whether we're going to recover money. And really, I mean, this is a good example of that. Like the bare facts of your case are one thing, but another huge thing is, can you collect on it?
Right.
Because I've tried a case against a dog owner that mauled my client's hand, and we have a nearly $100,000 judgment against the defendant. He didn't have any insurance policy, so we've got a piece of paper that says you're entitled to X amount of dollars, and it's worthless because the guy doesn't have anything.
So I mean, you can, I guess, garnish his paycheck for 50%.
Well, I mean, I can't now because he's dead.
Right. So there's just nothing.
There's
Nothing in his
nothing.
estate. He didn't own anything to cover it.
He lived with mom and dad. He had a 30-year-old Honda Civic. Like, he doesn't have anything.
And I've heard some lawyers refer to that as like they're judgment proof.
Judgment proof.
Basically, you can get a judgment, but there's no way to get blood out of a turnip, right?
Yeah, that reminds me of a time we were looking into one of our defendants to see, well, they had an insurance policy, but really that insurance policy was not enough to cover all of the damages my client had. And even with my client's uninsured motorist policy, it still was not really enough. She had a really bad injury.
All right.
So we were looking into like the defendant and saying, well, what can we go after? And we had an investigator kind of do an informal investigation. The investigator says, well, he's got a 30-year-old car. He doesn't own a house. And he has the kind of job that you would not keep if you had a judgment against you when you were facing like garnishment of your wages.
Right, because if you start taking 50% of their paycheck, they're just going to quit.
And you're working at a small mom and pop place.
You're just gone.
I'm not going to keep working.
So
what were you going to ask me before?
I guess my question is, because I run into this all the time, and I wanted you to kind of explain it. When you're filing a lawsuit or you're looking at filing it, aren't you just suing? Like, who are you suing? Because my people always say, well, I want to just sue the insurance company. I don't want to sue the person driving the car.
Right.
But
I just want to go after their insurance.
But
that especially happens when you're like talking to a person about their neighbor who did something wrong, and they say, well, I don't want to sue Joe. I just want to get their insurance money.
Right.
But it doesn't work. It doesn't work like that. We're going to cover this in another episode because it's a really long topic.
Okay, so we'll get back to that.
We'll get back to that. But the main thing that you need to hear now is when you're injured because of somebody's conduct, that person who caused your injuries, they're responsible. There may be an insurance policy that's particularly what I'm interested in. It's hard to get money from insurance companies, but it's a lot easier to get money from insurance companies than it is to get from an individual.
Well, because at least when you go to trial and you get the verdict,
right,
then the insurance company is going to have to pay that verdict.
Have to pay it. That's right. Yeah, we'll cover that in depth. That's a whole 10, 15 minute.
I'd like to chase
section.
that rabbit.
Let's take that one down the hole.
All right, what else we got?
All right, well, let's see here. I've got.
So good luck, guys, collecting your money.
Yeah, I mean, I feel terrible about it. I think I know. Don't you know one of the lawyers in there? They're really good guys.
Yeah, they're great guys.
And I think probably they knew that they had that issue, I think what they're doing is great because they're bringing it to the public's attention. Like, this is a problem. You've got, anyways.
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of people don't realize that. They're like, oh, just sue the hell out of them. Yeah. Well, okay.
Yeah. We have one of those questions when we get to the grab bag of questions. There's a question about suing a police officer, so we'll get to that. Now, this is interesting. This is a case from the from the Georgia Supreme Court about submitting to a urine test for DUI. So this, all right, okay. So this guy Awad.
Yes.
That's
our buddy's case. He argued that.
Sessions.
Ben Sessions.
Ben Sessions.
Yes.
How do I know him?
Thomaston, DUI defense lawyer. He's over at Atlanta.
That's right. Right, not Umville, Thomason.
That's right. Not Umville. That's where he grew up. Right, yeah.
Right. Okay, but I mean, wasn't he in like politics or something, Ben Sessions? Mm. No, I just know that name.
Yeah.
Okay. So anyways, this guy refused to provide a urine sample when he was pulled over for DUI. I don't know, were they going to have him like pee in a cup like on the side of the road?
Right. So the implied
consent. Does that actually happen?
So the implied consent card says that you can test for breath, blood, urine, or other bodily substances.
Implied consent. What is that? Is that like some sexual thing?
So when you get your license in Georgia, you fall underneath this implied consent law that says basically you have consented in order to drive on the roads of these states to give these samples of blood, breath, urine, or other bodily substances.
Wait,
if you're arrested for DUI.
I've got a driver's license. That means I've already agreed.
It is implied in your accepting your license.
Really?
Yes.
Okay.
So, the joke is the officer's going to come up and say, I'd like to have eye fluid.
eye fluid?
Yeah, just
crying?
Yeah, no, just I'm going to take a syringe and pull it out of your eye. It says other bodily fluids, so
Or other
whatever he wants to take, right?
Or other bodily
I
fluids.
refuse.
Right?
That's a bad idea.
Wait.
So you've got two.
I could get really dirty really quick.
It could get real. So the deal is when you get stopped for DUI and they feel like they have enough to place you under arrest, okay? So they've got to arrest you. Once they've arrested you, they read you this implied consent card. And it tells you that you have a right to refuse this test.
Like Miranda rights. They read it like you see it on TV.
Right. It's a little card they read at the end.
Okay.
So people would refuse, say, I'm not going to take that test. Okay. And then what would happen is at trial, the state would say, they knew they were going to fail the test. That's why they refused to give it. If they would have given it, we wouldn't be here, right?
They can say that? Doesn't that violate your right to...
Finally, as of 7/20/22, yes. But up until then, they could do it.
Really?
Right. If he would have given us some urine, we'd know now.
We wouldn't have to be wasting your time.
So what this case does is it basically says, look, you're asking somebody to give a substance. You're asking them to go and pee to do something.
To actively do something.
To actively give evidence on theirself, okay? He has a right under both the Georgia Constitution and the Fifth not to give this incriminating evidence. If he refuses to do that, you can't talk about it as trial to prove his guilt.
Because that's a violation of your Fifth Amendment rights. That's the whole point, right?
But this is a pretty amazing case.
Because they're finally recognizing it.
Yes, because we've created all these loopholes in DUI law because we're trying to get people off the street. We're trying to protect citizens, and I get it, but this was a clear... For years, people had said, this just isn't fair. It's not right. How is this right? And the court over and over has said, it's okay.
You mean like criminal defense attorneys like you were saying it's not fair to my
client that you tell him he has a right to remain silent.
Right.
He has a right not to give any evidence, and when he remains silent and doesn't give any evidence, we stuff it down his throat at trial. So this case is a pretty huge deal.
So they're finally recognizing what y'all have been arguing all along.
And losing.
And losing.
And losing over and over and over, yes.
Gosh. So what's going to happen now? Like in DUI, well, I've always just wondered, like in a DUI, if I'm getting pulled over,
right,
and I obviously would not have been drinking before then, like in today's day and age, if you can get, unless you're in Bill, Georgia.
Okay, let's say I've had a drink.
You had a drink.
Okay, I've had a drink.
Right, and you're going to drive back home.
The problem is I don't know how much and how my body reacts to that, okay? Or how long it's going to take for this to process out, or how long I'm going to give that off of my breath, how long it's going to come out my urine, because my kidneys, my body is different than yours, and your body, how I metabolize alcohol is different. So I have a big fancy test that the state troopers use, the little SFT test that I paid like $2,000 for, that I can blow in and it gives me the exact number. And if it ain't 000,
you don't go.
Period. End of story.
Right, because all the police hate you. They will find some reason.
They would love to throw me in the pokey. So, we don't want any of that to happen.
We don't want that.
So, but unless you have one of these devices, a lot of people just don't know. Most of the people I defend on DUI were at the Mexican restaurant and had the tequila, margarita, and the bartender mixed it a little too strong, and they blow a .08, which is right at the legal limit. And they're like, I wasn't drunk. And we're like, yeah, you don't have to be drunk. You got to be a .08. Well, I didn't feel a .08. Right, yeah. Well, that's not what the law says, right?
And now you're going to lose your driver's license.
Lose your driver's license. And so with this, you got two things going on. The implied consent law, because a lot of people say, I thought I had to take the test or I'm going to lose my driver's license. That's true.
That, in fact, is true, right?
But there's two separate things going on there. You've got the Department of Driver Services, DDS, that's going to suspend your license for either not taking the test or blowing over the legal limit. And then you have your DUI, which is a criminal think.
So wait. So what you're saying is the whatever it is that requires me to submit to a breathalyzer or else is like an administrative action. Like
it's an administrative action.
They'll take your driver's license away.
Correct. Right.
They'll revoke your driver's license.
And
so what do I do about that?
So if you got arrested and if they charged you with the DUI, they're going to give you what's called a 1205 form. On the back of that form, which nobody looks at, okay, are the instructions of how to appeal that suspension.
And let me guess, you better follow those instructions to
If
the
it's
letter.
not sent to the right place, certified mail with the right kind of check made out to the right person, it's going to come back in the mail
It's going to come back in the mail and you're going to lose your
and
license.
license are gone.
Okay.
But if you respond within 30 days and get it filed, and if you were to have refused everything, so I refuse to get out and walk and turn, I refuse to do the eye test, I refuse to stand on one leg and do the Mr. Miyagi, I refused everything.
Karate Kid.
Then there's not going to be enough evidence to uphold that suspension. Because just by saying no, that's not going to be enough, because they had to have a reason to arrest you to get you to say no.
I mean, it seems to me if I think that I'm not drunk, shouldn't I just say, yeah, I had 2 drinks and then pass the sobriety test?
Absolutely not.
Why?
Because you're giving evidence against yourself.
I know, but I'm not drunk.
Okay. In Georgia law,
Right?
you can get stopped for failing to maintain lane.
What does that mean?
That you didn't maintain your lane. Okay.
You go over the line.
In Georgia, you don't have to go over the line.
Seriously.
You don't have to go over the center line. You don't have to go over the fog line.
Dwayne, that's crazy. You're saying that I can be pulled over
Yes.
for just like, what if I just happen to be looking at my phone for a second and I just kind of swerved a little bit?
Swerving within the lines is failure to maintain lane. They're going to stop
Oh my
you.
God.
Okay.
Seriously?
Yes. And then when you say, how much have you had to drink? And you say, oh, just a couple. You've
Just a
now
couple.
admitted to consuming alcohol. So now they have a less
And
than
now the
safe
entire
act.
thing goes. So what do you do? What's your advice? Like, not that I'm ever planning on drinking
First of all,
and driving.
don't drink and drive.
Right.
Okay?
And in today's age, get a
Lyft,
get an Uber. We can say those words here, right? Yeah.
Right. I mean,
Get
get
a Lyft,
a ride share person to take you home. Get a friend to take you home.
It's so cheap and so easy.
So
you have an app
simple.
on your phone.
Right.
Big deal.
So, I mean, that's first thing. But if you get stopped and you've been drinking and you don't know, and you're like, well, maybe I've had too much, your best bet is just to remain silent. Officer comes up to your window, driver's license, insurance card, you got to give him that.
Right, because you could, and you don't know, because you could be at like a party and like taking a nap at the back in the back room of the party, and somebody could be like putting alcohol down your throat and you not know it.
Right, or somebody could have roofied your drink. You don't know what else is in your system at the time.
Yeah, somebody could have poured you a double and you thought it was a single.
Let's say that you've got some issues going on with ketosis, and now you're showing a false positive because you're borderline diabetic. I mean, there's all kind of things that are going to show a
You're
false
taking Percocet
positive.
at the same time, right?
Oh, yeah, people all the time. You're on any medications? Oh, yeah.
I was joking. That's serious? Really?
I'm taking methadone. Yeah, like, shut up.
Oh, my God.
Like, just be quiet.
So if you have a beer and a methadone, you're just done.
Right. I mean, because then I got to bring your doctor in to have him testify
Right.
that he prescribed it for you and that you've been on it long enough to build up a tolerance and it doesn't affect your ability to drive. So your best bet is, I don't want to talk about my day. I don't want to take any test. Are they going to arrest you? Maybe, maybe not. But either way, you haven't given them enough evidence to convict you. So, do you want to take this test? Absolutely not. I don't want to. Have you been drinking? I don't want to talk about it.
Find a nice way of saying,
yeah.
I'm
Be
not
polite.
I'm not really in a great mood, or really not. Rather not say it.
I think the easiest way is just, I don't want to talk about my day. The Pot Brothers out in California, they do that. I don't want to discuss my day. Done.
Done. Yeah.
Where are you going? Where are you coming from? Don't want to discuss my day. Done.
I prefer not to talk about it.
Don't want to talk about, hey, I need you to take some tests to see if you drive. Do I have to? No, you don't have to. Then I don't want to.
Yeah. Not interested.
I'm going to refuse.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nicely.
Yeah.
Nicely.
Politely.
Nicely. All right. Well, that's the news. Let's talk about, let's see, we have, can I sue for that?
Can I sue for that?
Here's the question from Can I Sue for That today. I was illegally detained by the police and then released, and they never said why I was stopped. Can I sue for that?
Yeah. You can sue for anything.
What did we talk about last time? Oh, right.
Do you get around qualified immunity?
Well, I mean, if you have a piece of paper
Right.
and you have a crayon and you have about $300,
Or you can file a pauper's affidavit. You may not even have to have the $300.
right? If
You can file a lawsuit.
you can do that all the time.
Question is, I think what they're asking is, can you win?
No. Well, actually, looking at that case that we looked at earlier, you could possibly win if the reason that they really pulled you over is because
You're transgender.
you're transgender, you're
black.
you're black, or you're Muslim,
Right.
Or you look like a terrorist, or whatever. Like you could win against them. The trouble is trying to find a lawyer who can afford to take on that issue because it's a lot of time. It's a lot of time.
And is it pretty much going to go up on appeal at some point?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Even if you survive their motion to dismiss,
They're going to take it up.
It's going to go up to the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals, and the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals has a long history of being very protective of the police.
Right.
For right or wrong, like I'm not taking a position on that. I am very firm supporter of the police unless they're being real bastards. So, anyways,
You insure
do we have a sponsor today?
Yes, we do have a sponsor today, and I really appreciate that. We got so the question is here, just an excuse. What do all these things have in common? Getting to work by 9, going on a date with someone you don't have a future with, brunch with your in-laws, jury duty, parent-teacher conference, church, your daughter's rhythmic gymnastic competition, wedding or a baby shower, or a dentist appointment. What's the main thing in common with all those?
I mean, I can think of a commonality, but I'm not sure it's like appropriate or like nice to say.
Just throw it out there. If you know the answer, just throw it out there.
They're all kind of annoying.
They're absolutely annoying.
Absolutely annoying.
Things you don't necessarily want to do, except for jury duty. Very important.
You really ought to. Can we pause there for a second? Like,
Sure.
Actually, frankly, I would love to be on a jury.
Oh, absolutely.
Like,
We'll never get on a jury again. It's done.
No, they'll never let us on a
Period.
jury.
We never get to hear
We're
what's
too
back there.
opinionated. We're lawyers. Anyways.
So, Ben, what if you could get away from all these annoying things?
How could I do that?
Just for one day.
Just for one day? I could get away? There's an excuse for that?
Yeah. And it's with Just in Time. You can.
Okay.
For a modest fee, you can get your very own excuse.
A custom-made excuse just for me?
These can vary from something as simple as a clever argument to verify your calendar or appointment where you're somewhere else.
Like I could get a calendar appointment from another business?
You can get a legitimate business booking showing
So I
you
could-
somewhere else.
So I could show, honey, I'm sorry, I can't be home with the kids. I have an appointment with ABC Corporation?
Yes, I'm
love
being
it.
deposed by ABC Corporation this afternoon. I can't appear.
Oh, God, that's
And
great.
if your needs are more urgent, they can arrange an emergency call to a spouse or a loved one, giving them your
so I could be
excuse.
like a dinner that I don't want to be at, and I could get an emergency call from justanexcuse.net?
Yes, they have
I love it.
pre-made excuses available for you. They can be delivered on demand for a reasonable fee.
Oh, gosh.
That's,
Where has that been all my life?
So it's justanexcuse.net. Check it out, guys.
Justanexcuse.net.
Well, Irreverent D, we did it again.
There we go.
Nice job.
Hey, look, Ma, they're still in the cup there.
Right? And we'll not be drinking and driving.
That's right.
Take care, y'all.
Thanks for listening. Tune in next time when Bob and Irreverent D talk law.